If you know me, you know that I love the word epic. This channel is called An Epic Life. If you saw my car, the license plate says Be Epic on it. And I'm always challenging people to have an epic life and to try to be more epic. Well, what does that word even mean? And where did my fascination with it come from? It goes all the way back to my senior year of high school. My favorite teacher was Mr. Metcalf. He was a lot of people's favorite teacher. He was our English teacher. That's what they called it back then. They probably call it language arts today. And he would make us memorize certain definitions and quotes and phrases. And one of the things he made us memorize was a literary term, the definition of an epic. And he said, guys, this is going to be on your test. Write out the definition of an epic, and you have to know it word for word. And so we would say it together as a class every day. It kind of became a running joke in our class. But here was the definition of an epic, and I still remember it 33 years later. An epic is a long narrative poem telling of the heroic deeds of a man of high station who is of particular significance to his people. And so I memorized it. I got an A on that test, and we all memorized it. We used to joke that maybe we should all just say this at graduation together because everybody took that class. And, what are the odds of that information ever being useful to me later in life? Pretty minuscule. Like most of the things I learned in school, I didn't think it was going to have any role in my future life, but I was mistaken. But I'll tell you, one of the things that just resonated with me about that is, it's a long narrative poem telling of the heroic deeds of a man of high station who is of particular significance to his people. And that resonated in my core. When I was in high school, I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up, but I knew I wanted to do something that mattered. Honestly, I read a lot of comic books growing up. I wanted to be a hero. I wanted to be a superhero, but I hadn't had any superpowers manifest at that point in my life. And so I might have to just settle for being an ordinary hero, somebody without superpowers, someone like Batman who didn't have any superpowers, but still went out and made a difference with his life. And so I started thinking about, epic. I want to have an epic life. That's what I decided. People would ask me, so Jeff, what are you going to do when you grow up? Like, I'm going to be epic. That's all I know. I'm going to have an epic life. How's that going to work out? I don't know. I guess we'll see. So fast forward, I go to college. I was a communication major in college. And I'll tell you in a later video about kind of how that decision came to be. It was really kind of interesting. But I was kind of an okay student, really kind of average at best. But I did an extracurricular activity. I was on a speech team, and we went around and did speech competitions. And I would prepare speeches like for informative speaking and persuasive speaking. And impromptu speaking, extemporaneous speaking, where you kind of go into a room and they give you a topic and you give a speech about it. And I actually did pretty good in that. My senior year, I won the state championship in Ohio in 5 different speaking events. And one of them was an event called rhetorical criticism, something you probably never heard of. But rhetorical criticism is essentially the study of rhetoric or speeches. You take some kind of speech or something that someone was trying to communicate a message, and you analyze, was it effective, was it not effective, and why? I also took a class that I really enjoyed my senior year of college called rhetorical criticism. And the professor, Dr. Lopez, insisted to us that this was a graduate level class that we were taking as undergrads. I don't know if that was true or not, but it really interested me. My problem in college is I only really put effort into classes that interested me. As a result of that, I did not have very good grades. I graduated from college with a 2.8 GPA. Not very impressive. I think it's like a B minus, maybe a C plus. Not great, frankly. Not impressing future employers, that's for sure. And I was starting to get a little stressed out my senior year on what I was going to do after college, right? Because everyone told me that if you don't have good grades, you can't get a good job. Nobody ever mentioned that I might want to end up eventually having a business of my own. That never came up a single time. It was go to school, get good grades, get a good job. And so I was starting to get stressed out that I wasn't going to be able to get a good job. Well, at the state championship in speech competition my senior year, one of the judges who actually judged me in rhetorical criticism was a guy named Dr. Rhodes. And he was a professor at Miami University in Oxford, Ohio. And after the awards ceremony, he came up and shook my hand, congratulated me, and he said, "You're an impressive young man, Mr. Joyner." And I said, "Oh, thank you, sir. I appreciate that." He said, "Hey, do you know who I am?" I know you teach at Miami University. He goes, "I don't just teach there. I'm the chairman of the Department of Communications and the director of the speech team there at Miami University." And he said, "I'd love to have you come and work with our program at Miami University." I was like, "Really?" He said, "Have you ever thought about graduate school?" I said, "No." Not even once. Never ever has graduate school crossed my mind. In fact, I was a little scared whether or not I was even going to graduate because I was struggling in a couple of my classes. And he said, "Well, I'd like to offer you a full ride scholarship to come to graduate school. And you can get a master's degree at Miami in speech communication. You can help coach our speech team. And, what do you think?" And I said, "Have you seen my grades?" And he said, "I don't even care about your grades." I said, "I accept your offer." And so I came home from this speech competition and told my fiance, who's my wife now, "Hey, I think I'm going to graduate school." And she said, "I don't think so." And I'm like, "No, seriously, I just accepted a scholarship." She's like, "What? You didn't even apply?" And so I was going to graduate school. So we got married that summer. Actually, the same day we graduated from college, we got married. And off we went to Oxford, Ohio, where I was starting this graduate program. And when I got there, I was very intimidated by some of the other students. There was 13 of us that were all in this program, the master's program in the field of speech communication. And most of them were obviously very smart, very intelligent, very accomplished. We're kind of going around the room the first day and they're, I got an undergraduate degree in international relations. I'm a pre-law. I already have a law degree and now I'm getting a master's in speech. There wasn't any other B- students in there, I can assure you, except for me. And I'm like, "Oh, I'm Jeffy." And I remember being very nervous if I was going to be able to hang, because obviously I'm going to be compared. We all were taking the same classes together. That's how this program worked. That everybody took all the same classes, especially the first few semesters. And so as they're introducing this graduate program to us, we were told, "Hey, you guys are really in for a treat. There's a visiting professor who's going to be on campus this year. He's only here for only 1 year. He's one of the leading scholars in the field of communication. His name is Dr. John Murphy. And he's one of the most brilliant, most accomplished people in our field. And you guys, not only are you going to get to have a class with him this year, which is an extraordinarily rare treat, but it's going to be your very first class starting tomorrow. You're all going to be taking a class on rhetorical criticism with Dr. John Murphy." Well, I was a little intimidated about Dr. Murphy, and he was an intimidating guy. We ended up calling him the judge because he looked like a judge. But I had a glimmer of hope because the class was in rhetorical criticism. I've already had a class in rhetorical criticism, and Dr. Lopez insisted that it was a graduate level class. Maybe I can hang in this one class. So we get there the first day, and I bring my textbook. I look in the syllabus, find out that the textbook for this new class is the same textbook we used in my class last year when I was in college. And so I've already read and highlighted the textbook. So I brought it with me. And come to find out that the books were delayed being available at the college bookstore. And so I was the only one that had the textbook the first day of class, and it was already highlighted. I looked like a real achiever there. And so Dr. Murphy is introducing himself, and we're kind of going around the room. And he says, "Mr. Joyner, I see you have the textbook." And I said, "Well, I'm already a student of rhetorical criticism." And then Brett, the guy that I share my office with, goes, "Jeff was actually the state champion in rhetorical criticism and speaking." And Dr. Murphy says, "Oh, really? That's interesting." And I'm like, "Oh, no. You don't want to be the guy in the first 10 minutes of class sticking your head up like you're the big brown noser in class. And I want to have low expectations that I can knock out of the park. I don't want my teachers having high expectations. This is not going well." And so I decided I'm just going to sit here and be quiet. I'm not going to say anything. And everyone's looking at each other. It was clearly a very competitive environment. And I see some of the really smart kids that they're looking at me like, "Got my eye on you, Joyner." And so I said, "All right, I'm just going to sit here and be quiet and hope for the best." And maybe nobody's going to realize. Here's the nice thing that nobody knew what our grades were as an undergrad. Nobody in that class knew. The teacher didn't know. Nobody knew except for the registrar of the graduate school. I found out later that the minimum GPA to be admitted into the graduate school at Miami University was a 2.75. I had a 2.8. I barely even was allowed to come to school there. I was literally the dumbest kid that they've ever let into their graduate program at Miami University. And so I knew that. Nobody else knew that. No one else needed to know that information, but that was in the back of my mind, and it was kind of hurting my confidence. So I decided just to sit there quietly. Well, Dr. Murphy starts introducing himself that, he is a scholar in the field of speech communication. And, within the field of communication, there's this area called speech communication, which has to do primarily with the study of, people speaking about, verbal communication. And he said within the field of speech communication, there's a much smaller discipline that is rhetorical criticism. It's really digging in and diagnosing, why certain types of rhetoric are effective and other ones aren't. And he said, within the field of rhetorical criticism, he said, my specialty is a type of communication called the narrative. He said, I don't really know much about it, but he said, throughout most of history, people believed what Aristotle taught, that people made decisions based on logic and reasoning. And he believed in kind of a new field of communication study that I think it started in the 60s called the narrative paradigm. The idea being that human beings don't make decisions based on logic and reasoning, that human beings are storytellers. Proponents of this narrative paradigm believe that people really are persuaded not on the logic that they hear or statistics, but on the stories that they hear. And you know what? This seems to be true. This seems to mesh with what I know about the world. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And he said, in fact, so within the field of, communication, you got speech communication. And then within that, you got rhetorical criticism. Within that, you have the study of narrative. And he said, my particular area of expertise, and what I've done a lot of my writing on, is a certain type of narrative called the epic. And then he asked a question that changed the whole course of my life. He said, can anyone define for me what an epic is? I just sat there. Everyone just sat there. Nobody's going to be the person to define the first term brought up in the first class of graduate school. And I'm thinking back in my mind, because of Mr. Metcalf's class, I know exactly what an epic is. It's like the one thing I remember from high school. But I can't say it. I can't be that guy. So I just sit there. And he's looking around the room. We're at this big conference table. All 13 of us. Nobody answers. And Dr. Murphy says, well, certainly somebody here must know what that word means. You've all heard it before, haven't you? You've probably used it before in a sentence, but you don't know what it means? And everyone just sat there. And I'm like, I can't. I want to, but I can't. Nope, I'm not going to do it. This is like candid camera. Where's the hidden camera? This is like punked, right? That they're trying to trick me. I am not going to be that guy who volunteers my specific definition. So I'm just sitting there. And Dr. Murphy, then he calls on me. He says, well, Mr. Joyner, since you've apparently the only one here who's ever studied rhetorical criticism, how would you define the term epic? And I said, okay, if he's going to call on me, I'm going to go for it. So I said, I'm not totally sure, but off the top of my head, if I had to define an epic, I would say that an epic is a long narrative poem telling of the heroic deeds of a man of high station who is of particular significance to his people. And I've never heard a room go so quiet in my life. I started looking around this room and everyone's jaws are dropped, and you can just see in their faces, all of these super smart kids are looking at the dumb kid, but they all think, man, there's no way I'm going to be able to hang in this class. And Dr. Murphy just looks at me. He pulls a pen out of his pocket and he gets his notepad and he says, can you say that again? I said, well, I don't know if I could say it exactly the second way off the top of my head like this, but I think, if I had to define what an epic is, that an epic is a long narrative poem telling of the heroic deeds of a man of high station who is of particular significance to his people. He's writing this down. And he starts looking at it. Huh. And he says, Mr. Joyner, I got to tell you, I'm an expert on this subject. There's a lot of people would tell you that I am the expert on this subject. And yet, as I'm looking and listening to your definition, I have to say, I literally could not have said it better myself. Well done, young man. Well done. That's how I started graduate school. Well, as we're leaving the room that day, he pulls me, Mr. Joyner, please stay back for a minute. I'm like, oh boy. And he says, hey, I'm very impressed with you so far. I'm like, well, thank you. I'm an impressive sort. And he says, have you chosen an advisor yet for your master's thesis? And the way typically it works that, people do like a year of classes and then like another year working on their thesis. This is the first day. I said, no, I haven't thought about my master's thesis. That's like at the end of the semester. And he said, well, I'm only going to be here for 1 year. I'd be honored to be your thesis advisor and to work on your thesis committee. And in fact, I have some ideas for some topics if you'd be interested in that. And I said, sure. So I had someone on my thesis committee the first day. And what I found out later is that he went straight back to the teacher's lounge where all the other teachers in the department were hanging out. And it was like, have you guys met Jeff Joyner? He's the smartest kid that's ever gone to school here. He blew me away. So he was bragging on me to the other teachers. We go to the next class. Dr. Monjo is our professor, and he's doing attendance roll call. And he's like, Jeff Joyner. I'm like, here. He's like, so you are the one. I was Neo from the Matrix. And here's what happened. From that day forward, all the teachers gave me A's no matter how much work I did. No matter what I did. No matter what I turned in, they were all like, brilliant as usual, Mr. Joyner. I breezed through that program, got the first 4.0 in my life, graduated at the top of the class, got all A's. And then in that spring, they offered me a faculty position there. I was 22 years old. I was the youngest full-time faculty member that they ever hired. And so I went from being a B- undergraduate college student, not even sure if I was going to get a college degree. And then in less than a year, I was a full-time faculty member at a major university. Well, what's the moral of the story? I'll challenge all of you. I do think in life you don't always get what you want, but you get what you expect. And I have expected from the time I was young for good things to come my way, for opportunities to come along. And when they came along, I was going to go for it. And this was one of those opportunities. I ended up teaching there and coaching their speech team for 5 years. And we had a lot of success with that program. And it was foundational to the whole rest of my career. But it all came about because I memorized some obscure definition when I was in high school. And so that's my challenge to you, is expect great things. That's part of having an epic life, is you just are on the lookout for opportunities to be heroic. And there's going to be opportunities that come your way. And when they come, I say just ride it, man. Ride the wave and see what happens. And I'm still working on having significance with my people. But I'm pretty excited about being on the path of living an epic life.